Have you ever talked yourself into something that your gut clearly said no to? And then the situation went sideways, and there was some part of you that knew it would happen like that. And you wish you had done it a little bit different. You wish you had listened. Maybe you've had the situation where you felt pulled in a certain way and you followed it. And then it opened a door you never could have planned for. You followed your gut and it opened a door that you never could have planned for. You went for it and then good things happened. Most people have experienced both. And most people have spent years trying to figure out why one goes right and one goes wrong. But here's the thing. Intuition doesn't give you reasons. It gives you direction. It says yes. It says no. It says stop. It says go. It doesn't say why. It's a signal. It's not trying to convince you of anything. It's just giving its 2 cents. And it operates fast and sometimes faster than you can consciously process it with your mind, which is the beauty of the tool, is that it works without a conscious effort. But if you don't trust it, then it's a whole lot of nonsense. In our culture, emotions and body sensations have been treated as threats, as mysteries, as reminders of what we are not or what we cannot handle. We're never taught that these responses are the language of a tool that is on our side and trying to help us and trying to guide us. So, what if the sensations and emotions you feel are not problems to manage? What if they are directions to follow? And what if your body has been trying to show you where to go your entire life and nobody has told you that is what is happening? My name is Sarah Nickerson, and welcome to Sovereign Humankind, evolving inner authority through metaphysical skill. I am a psychic medium and founder of NextGenMedium.com and the NextGen Sovereign Online Metaphysical Abilities Education Center and community space. This episode, we are talking about intuition as directional messaging, what it is, how it communicates through your body, why most people stopped being able to hear it, and how to start building that channel back up again. Understanding intuition will allow you to start separating your actual inner signal from the noise of conditioning and fear. And when you can do that, decision-making starts to feel like it belongs to you again. There is actually a timing that takes place where things get decided quicker. And then what happens with those intuitive guiding moments that you choose to follow helps to build you a life that gets you closer to living more comfortably, with more ease, more contentment, more fulfillment. And that's the point. The point is getting realigned with who you really are and being able to trust the tools you have, intuition being one of them. So today we are covering what intuition actually is as a biological and perceptual system, why the tool gets distorted, and how to tell distortion from the real signal, but also what reclaiming this tool looks and feels like layer by layer. We live in a society where a lot of people would say the term gut feeling, talking about intuition, thinking you have a gut feeling. Most people, when asked if they believe in a gut feeling, they say yes. We have an understanding of what that is. And the phrase has, thankfully, survived thousands of years of conditioning and rationalism and the dismissal of body-based knowing. So the gut feeling phrase, it has survived. It has continued to thrive, which is great. But do we actually understand what intuition is? Like these are the things we need to talk about. This is what we're clarifying here, and that you are learning the differences of. So gut feeling, we're naming the location in the body that is a place of signal of our intuition. And there's no accident there. We collectively, maybe primitively, have a rationality that our intuition tool utilizes the gut feeling. We understand that. And here's the other thing of the intuitive messaging that comes through. Gut feeling is a pretty powerful one. And for us to recognize that that's part of our intuitive toolkit, of our intuitive language, that's us noticing a louder signal of intuition, which is a great place to start. But ask those same people if they believe in intuition. And I bet that's a term that they don't feel so confident about. So when we look at the word intuition, we see it's been separated from the experience of like gut feeling. And our language around this, of course, gets affected and makes things more complicated in the understanding of our metaphysical tools. Part of what we're doing here is we are defining and we are reconsidering and we're trying to get a clear understanding. And my hope is that my experience with these things and my years of experimentation and clarification and personal experience, my own ahas and intuition in recent years, and to pass that along to you so you can have your own ahas about this. This is when we really gain experience, and this is what we trust. Our own experience. This is our own firsthand account. And that's what helps us gain a new truth, gain a new understanding, and maybe gain a new belief, but also give us a chance to really embody the true human experience that is here for us. So the common story is that intuition is unreliable. It doesn't maybe exist. We believe in gut feeling, but intuition is more than just gut feeling. And when it comes to feelings aren't facts, and logic is safer. And this is the whole onslaught of things working against our intuition, or just intuition as a concept. And so one of the problems here is logic only works with information that has already made it to your conscious mind. Intuition is processing data that has not gotten to that logic piece yet. Logic is definitely part of our processing system when it comes to should I listen to my intuition or not. It's absolutely part of the process. We never say logic isn't important. Logic absolutely is important. The amount of weight we put on logic thinking, though, that is skewed. And maybe this is more my theory of understanding, because we rely so much on logic to live our day to day. We really suppress emotion and the guidance of the intuition because we haven't been taught how to use it or to be able to witness it working and to trust that. So with intuition, it processes information that doesn't utilize our logic, and we're not used to that. You are doing environmental reads, there's pattern recognition, there's signals going on below the threshold of conscious thought, there's internal environmental cues happening. There's external of looking at people's faces and seeing how they're taking the information you're sharing. And so we've come to utilize our logic as more reliable, or that is how we discern, is we use our logic. And in many cases, your intuition is the faster way of moving forward or choosing things. And your intuition is what is taking things into account that if it works properly, it's not filtering the social conditions or taking into account maybe threats of your physical safety that isn't actually there. And so utilizing our intuition, seeing it work, means we got to see where the dysfunction is so we know what to pay attention to when the intuition is actually speaking to us. But for the most part, in our culture, in our society, we're trained to trust reasoning over what the body is telling us. In fact, that is how control can work best when it's coming from outside of the self, is to have the individual basically shut off whatever you can shut off in that body and be led through a mechanism of some sort. It's funny that we talk a lot about reasoning and logic, because it seems like we've become a very emotionally led society, but we're emotionally led in a non-sovereign way. We're emotionally led through the control of external, outside, outsourced sources, outsourcing our trust and truth and choice. I think we are in an era where we are really starting to reconnect with an emotional body, but unfortunately, it's an emotional body that has an adult as the avatar, but the inner child is the emotional body, and it's a blunted, hurt 8-year-old, 4-year-old, 12-year-old that's running the show. And in that case, how can your intuition really work when your emotional self is so blunted and coming from a place of hurt and shame and guilt and fear and stuff like that? But the result for a lot of people is a lifetime of good logic and uncomfortable outcomes. An interesting thing about my story with intuition is I was very much a cerebral liver. I lived my life in my head and learned to try to suppress my body's sensations and emotions as much as possible because they were inconvenient, and in some ways they limited how I could live my life. So I grew up very cerebral and logical because I didn't know how to connect safely with my body. The interesting thing here, and that this is why intuition has been such an aha for me, because then I learned all the things that I thought were a threat were actually trying to tell me something. It was messaging. It was, Sarah, listen, this is going to help you. But I didn't see it like that because I didn't know why it was torturing me. And I had to shut off the tools because I did not understand them. And so once I started studying psychic ability and then became logically aware of the separation of what I was experiencing was intuition in some ways, that's when I realized I have my own intuition. It's been working with my psychic work. I just didn't know what it was. I didn't know what it looked like. I didn't know how it was messaging, how it was signaling me, and that there is a language to it. I was starting to figure out the language when I was trying to do meditations, getting artifacts in the imagination space through psychic work, and things would come up of, that's not real. This is not true. This stuff is not like psychic. I don't know why I'm doing it. I don't know who I think I am. What are people going to think of me? This kind of stuff is the conditioning pieces that make it so I can't trust my intuition. These phrases, these fears, these are the things that are latched onto my signaling within my body. And that's why it was like the biggest revelation to me. Once I started recognizing the intuition that I was experiencing that had a clear signal with psychic work. Once I figured out what intuition was, I could pick it apart. With that, I have a better understanding of like how this works, how it can work for other people, how people can recognize it for themselves, what they have to peel apart in order to see that their intuition is there, that it is working. There's just other shit that's in the way, but that shit was there for your social survival or your physical survival. And it gets kind of complicated there, but that doesn't mean that your tool's not working. It just means you have to pay attention to things a little bit differently. And that's why it's like your individual language. But no matter what, we each have this tool and we need to identify it. We need to learn when it speaks to us, its signals, and being able to see it in somebody else or to partner yourself with somebody whose intuition works better than yours, seemingly works better than yours. Here's where things get interesting, because when you start actually working with the tool, there are things that take place that really changes your relationship with yourself and the world around you. Let's get into our first point here, which is what intuition actually is. Intuition is, I always call it a language, but another way we can talk about it is it's a signal. Intuition, it's your body's directional intelligence. It's not a thought with words, but it's a signal. I like to think of it as it functions as an internal compass. Another way I like to say it is it's like our internal magic 8 ball. where you shake the magic 8 ball and there's like this die inside and there's only so many answers it can give you. You shake it, something surfaces as an answer and it gave its 2 cents. And then you have to decide to move forward or not, dependent on the advice given to you by the magic 8 ball. We can also think of your intuition as a compass, and the emotions and sensations you feel are the directions to move forward or not. How quickly to move forward. With intuition, we're thinking of ourselves as a chess piece, and intuition as the system giving you the next move. So it's one square at a time, and this is actually all that you need to do is one square at a time. Even though we want to move mountains, we do it one square at a time. When we talk about intuition, where we focus is, I would say, the lower part of our heads, and it goes all the way down to your stomach and your gut. And this is my theory that intuition is a part of the signaling of the vagus nerve. And if you look at the anatomy, the vagus nerve runs from that location that I just pointed out. So my theory is the mechanism behind intuition is the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve runs the exact pathway from the base of the skull. I think there's even like branches into the ear. It goes down the base of the skull, the throat, the chest, into the gut. It's a signaling network that directly connects the brain and the body. And I honestly think it's the vagus nerve as to why we say gut feeling. I think it's the messaging of the vagus nerve that is something that all of us experience, that is a cultural norm for us, that we already know. We just maybe didn't have a framework to connect what we were describing to a specific biological system that I have come to recognize and realize is the intuitive biology of why our intuition is what it is, in how we receive signaling sensations. And it's part of what we need to exercise in order to gain control of intuition or feel a sense of trust with our intuition. Intuition speaks through 2 channels or 2 modes, sensation and emotion. Some people lead more with sensation, some more with emotion. Both are valid. I believe there's 2 in case one doesn't work well for you individually or one becomes impaired. You still have the other that you could maybe use the signaling for. But both are valid, and this is your personal intuition language. And I do believe that there's sort of a bifurcation of the language. The emotions are the things that are telling you information. The sensations are supporting what the emotions are telling you. And you can have that vice versa. The sensations are telling you where to go or not go, how to move or how not to move. And the emotions are supporting the sensations. And here's the other thing with intuition. Intuition is body-based. In the sense of intuition, it makes you feel yes. It feels no. This is the language it gives you with emotion and sensation. It says, go forward, do it now. Or it says, hold up now. Intuition doesn't have an explanation. It just gives you the instruction. And based on your conditioning, your nervous system, your vagus nerve tone is how the language will work specifically for you. And that's why you have to learn to, I can give you cues and clues, but you're the one that needs to observe what's going on and then create your own theory, because it's through that discernment, using your logic, using your observation, that you learn to recognize where your intuition is actually speaking up for you and conversating with you. For me, a go signal is usually I feel excited about something. And so when I feel inspired or excited, I feel that emotion. And with that, I feel like a cold lift in my upper chest. A stop signal or a wait signal is like a sinking heaviness or a dread or a tightening in the gut. Sometimes there's even just sort of like nothing. There's sort of like, I don't feel any particular way about this. Sort of like, well, I guess I don't have to decide anything right now. And maybe it's a wait signal. But intuition, it's there to just give its 2 cents. You don't have to follow it, but not following it is an opportunity to have to deal with it later. Where does the signal come from? Where does the intelligence of the signal come from? And the honest answer is, I don't know. I have a theory that it's of the higher self. And anything of the higher self is of source, because we're all connected. But this is like my theory. And this isn't necessarily like I'm beholden to this theory, like I really believe it. But what matters to me is the practicality of the signal, because that's the thing I have to rely on and the thing I need to move around in this physical world. And it helps me survive and helps me expand my experience beyond just a Homo sapien who's trying to, make money, just wants to build an in-law apartment off my house for my kids, So where does the signal come from? Like, I don't know. I am not here to be the one that tells you where that comes from. I'm just the one that's supposed to help you experience and find practical use of these abilities. And I will honestly say that not understanding that aspect, where is this signal coming from? It is something that I am convinced I'm never going to understand. I'm never going to know, because I've got a human brain and I can only understand things to a certain extent. And I can expand that with visiting the spiritual realm in the ways that I have been able to experience it. And maybe there will be new ways to experience that I could expand upon. But ultimately, I will not understand it much. There are things you have to accept as something you will not have a truth in. Because as humans, we're not equipped to obtain all the truth, or much of it, honestly. Why do you think aliens is still a mystery to us? It's because there's something we don't understand there. Our work here is not to understand the source. Our work is about learning to recognize the signal, test it, document it, and build trust through evidence, through experience. It's got to prove itself. And then once you obtain that, you start learning what trust feels like. And you feel it within yourself. And then you can recognize it outside of the self. There is a sense of blind faith in this work because there's something giving that signaling, right? Where is that coming from? Why is that happening? Is it outside of the self? Is it of me? What is it? Is it God? But it's not blind in the sense that it's something that you just accept. It's something that takes experience to trust. And that needs to prove itself. But you also have to seek out the patterns. You're not looking for the answer. You're just looking for the evidence. And it's also important to recognize, this is where intuition gets a little, like with our definition, gets a little hung up here. Because intuition can be thought of as the source signaling you with messaging. But I think in our work, we understand it as a skill, that there's a language here. You need to decipher. You need to discern. And with that, we're looking at it as I am a receiver of information that is being signaled to me through emotion and sensation. What is the message? Why is this tool something that we need to pay attention to and learn the language of? And the term I use a lot is that, especially for intuition, our emotions got hijacked. Our nervous system got hijacked. So why today are we in a place of talking about intuition and that it's a tool for all of us, but none of us are in tune with? And so we got to go back in time to understand it. I always think like 14,000 years ago, we had societies that were capable of having individuals with intuition. But there came a point when civilizations got too big and intuition was getting in the way of people being in power. When tribes were smaller, communities were smaller. There was a collective survival that was dependent on people being able to read their environment, understand a sense of danger, and even feel direction without needing explanation first. And that signal, I believe, in ancient humans was trusted, innate, natural. It was a part of cultural doing, like it was a part of our ability to just be, But as societies grew from tribes into civilizations, power structures emerged, and people who trust their own inner signal, they would not easily defer to external authority. I believe, like I term it as a sovereign tool, I think it's a way that people can be like, I don't trust you. I don't think you have good intentions. And I feel that, I feel you're an asshole and I don't want anything to do with you. I don't want you to be in charge of my tribe. What had to evolve was the invention of hijacking emotions. And so injecting fear of physical safety is absolutely going to do that when food is taken away or you're physically harmed. Like these are things that are going to become part of the culture in order for power to be upheld. And in doing so, we are compromising the nervous system, and we also will utilize not just a physical threat, but also social threat, which is the more modern and more refinement of the civilization power structure toolkit. It adds more complexity to the mix when you utilize social threat. And we are really built on social threat at this point, where physical is still there, but we've sort of integrated emotion threat and physical threat. And that works really well for people to make a lot of money and also keep people in line. So societies grew from tribes into civilizations. Power structures emerged. People who trust their own inner signal won't be easily deferring to external authority. And so they're not going to go along with this, you taking my power thing, or it's done covertly, creating conditioning of emotion and creating dysfunction of the nervous system. And so conditioning intuition out of people, I don't think is accidental. It's what occurred in order for the invention of, that one person in authority to be and remain in authority, in power. So for whoever holds power, a population that outsources its truth is far easier to manage than one that checks internally first. They are shutting off their sovereignty in order to have somebody outside of the self maintain power, not consciously, but to survive. So one of the main mechanisms that makes this handoff of you suppressing or not utilizing your intuition is amplifying fear and having it live inside of you, and to have it be very loud and urgent and demanding inside of you. And it drowns out the quieter, more subtle signals. And so there really is a sense of drowning out your own voice so that someone else's power lives rent free in your nervous system and your fear place in your brain. The reason your intuition feels unreliable is not that the tool's broken. It's that something louder was installed over it. Intuition uses emotions and body sensations as its language. Conditioning targets the same systems. When I talk about hijacking, this is what I'm talking about. There is a mechanism that has gotten control of your amygdala, and that amygdala is doing its job, but it's adding too much to the conversation because most of the time we're not in a threatful situation. It seems like we are, but we're not. And so we are taught to suppress emotion, dismiss sensation, stay in our heads, and prioritize logic above all else. The intuition tool does not disappear though. It just gets drowned out. It's more subtle. And honestly, it does speak. It's just You've learned to have your attention and awareness at the loud things. What we need to do is learn to bring our attention and awareness to all of it, not just the stuff that's not quiet. And yes, the nervous system, it also plays a role. If a person grew up in a threatening environment where internal awareness is not safe, the system defaults to outward scanning, hypervigilance, fight or flight. A quiet internal signal is very hard to hear when the alarm is always on. It's also hard to hear when your system is just not working. So there is an important distinction with fear and intuition. Now, I'm not saying you don't feel bad feelings with intuition. In fact, that's part of its vocabulary, bad feeling, because that is the feeling that's telling you don't go that direction. Don't do things with that person. Be mindful of this terminology that was used. And how do you feel about that? You don't like it. So you feeling that way, there's a reason why, But fear, it's loud. It's story heavy, and it builds a case. It usually is a very specific outcome that someone will find out, that you'll fail, that you'll be rejected. Like there's shame, there's guilt and shame. I feel like those are the key feelings that let you know fear's in charge. And it's probably an irrational fear for the most part. But when intuition speaks, it's not talking about your identity. It's not talking about shame or guilt. It's talking about possibility and preservation of the self, of survival. And if it does speak to ego, which it may do occasionally, that is an invitation to explore what it is that is being challenged. If we are feeling shame or guilt, this is the cue that your power is external of yourself at this point, with what your intuition or your emotion, sensation, messaging window here, what is being spoken to. When I'm helping people figure out their intuition, first we need to see when the opportunities are happening, that intuition is surfacing. Just bringing my attention to it. Already, this is when intuition is surfacing. This is when signaling is happening. The language is taking place. It's being spoken to me. And for me, talking it out actually helps me register the signaling that's happening. It sort of like initiates, I'm having a conversation with my intuition. It's like, what's the feedback? And here's what I'm giving, and what is it giving back to me? That is an opportunity to practice and witness your intuition. But there will be other times where you're at work, someone comes up to you and asks you a question, and sometimes your signaling will be like, oh, that feels good. And then you're like, oh yeah, that sounds great. Let's do it. And then there'll be maybe another time where you're not feeling so good about it. And maybe you already know why. Or why don't I feel good about this? Do I have something already scheduled on that day and I just forgot what it is? What is it that just doesn't feel right here? And honestly, if I was feeling that way, I would go, okay, is it my ego? But there's a feeling you're feeling. Investigate that. For me, when I'm teaching people, when you recognize those moments, this is the opportunity to learn the language. And you're not even judging what's happening and what's wrong with me and this, what fears do I have? What shame and guilt is surfacing? You're observing. You're just watching what happens. And so first is noticing when these moments arrive, but second is noticing the sequence of events. What emotions and sensations came and the timing that they came, because timing is important with intuition, especially when you're in that place of recognizing intuition for yourself, learning to discern and be able to build trust in the tool. Because I know for me, there used to be a time when I would feel excited about an opportunity and then I would feel the fear. And that's how the pattern sometimes worked for me. It depended on the situation. But typically, I'd feel excited, like, oh, opportunity, but then, but I'm not that kind of person. Oh, open mic night coming up on that night. Oh, that means I got to be in front of people. That's the kind of stuff that would go through my head and really limited me in what I thought I was capable of doing. And just imagine the fears and the limitations that I put on myself because of what other people would think of me. Now, lately, with my nervous system just losing its mind, it's been fear, and then I'll feel excited because it's almost like my body's just got a wall up and doesn't want me to do anything. It wants to protect me at all costs because everything's just been so crazy lately. I've been observing since 2018. So, I've had time to see an evolution. I've had time to see a change and to also have the experience of both of those things, but also have the experience of intuition that just works and I move with it and I'm moving on to the next thing. And life happens so much more easier when you can just live your intuition. It's not even witnessing, observing. It's we are one. The signal does not always arrive in the same order for every person, every situation. Sometimes fear arrives first. Sometimes excitement arrives first. But you just got to look at the sequence of events. And that right there is what opens up the door. Once you start discerning, like, what are my fears? You'll start to see the pattern, how it emerges. And you start learning almost unconsciously what to start tamping down as to what's coming through for messaging. It's almost like as soon as you can identify what other people think, it's very important to me. Right? So that would be a fear that seems to come up as part of my intuition signaling. That's hijacked emotion. That is not your intuition. Once I see, oh, I'm afraid of what people think, is that a part of this messaging signal right now? Is that what's coming through? When you start noticing, oh, there it is again, then you learn to like kind of skip past it. And then you're looking at the other piece and you start giving that other piece more attention and awareness. And as you're doing that, you're building the neural pathways to skip the fear piece. That doesn't mean that you are recovering from the fear. That means that its conditioning is becoming less prominent in your intuition stuff. So the most important practice after a big moment of choice or opportunity, of course, pay attention to the reactions, but observe it all. Notice the sequence, because this is the building blocks of you trusting this amazing tool of intuition. Okay, so let's talk about what reclaiming it looks like. First of all, it's there. When we use the term reclaiming, what we're really doing is we're starting to pay attention. That's it. You're just gaining attention and awareness. And we're talking about with reclaiming, really reclaiming attention, what we're focusing on. And so let's talk about the layers here. One layer that we need to be mindful of is our nervous system. And really gaining a relationship with this animal piece of us. Your nervous system has evolved from your lizard self to your mammalian primate self. And with that, we need to recognize its signals. And this is a part of the sensation and emotion. But just recognizing what kind of mode it's in and what kind of triggers allow you to know that language, fight and flight, what you are feeling both sensationally and emotionally in these different states. How long do you stay in these states? Is it constant? Are you constantly in one of these states? The interesting thing is learning that there are ways that we can help to recondition the nervous system, that we're not stuck with the nervous system we have. We can grow capacity with it. It has the ability to function better for you. But, you got to pay attention to it, and you got to gain awareness of it. And honestly, once I gained awareness of my nervous system, I started learning ways to relax it. And it's really simple stuff. Just breathing is one way to connect with the vagus nerve, which is the nerve that I'm obsessed with, obviously, but we are learning to control. Even probiotics help you to relax the nervous system. And then the other layer we got to take into consideration, and that is conditioning suppresses your emotion. The patterns that are installed early when you're a kid, they are integrated once you start going to school, even what you grow up with in your household. These institutions that are instilling certain rules, a hierarchy of power and that you are a part of that strata somewhere, probably not at the top. This is the layer where intuition tool is being blocked by rules you were given by somebody else, truth that was given by somebody else, and trust that you externalize, and limited freedom and choices. So we got to assess each of these layers to really know what's going on and to gain familiarity with this and what your language encompasses. And it's really difficult, and I know this from experience, to do this work when your nervous system is in emergency mode. I signed up for this 3-week somatic group thing. It was online. One of the exercises had us closing our eyes and sort of feeling what was going on in our body. And I've been able to do this exercise before. In fact, I teach it. But this circumstance and what I was going through at that time, and I think part of this had to do with withdrawing from an SNRI on top of like hormone change stuff, like holy nightmare. I was doing this exercise of interoception, and it felt really uncomfortable to me. It was so uncomfortable that I couldn't get through the exercise. And it was such a simple, dumb exercise, but I couldn't do it. And so I can now understand it's because my nervous system was so out of my control at that time for a variety of reasons. And it's really hard to do any body work when your nervous system is just out of your control. And so your work is to gain awareness of these different layers that have to do with your intuition, either the nervous system piece, but also your conditioning. And you're just noticing its presence. This is how the work begins, because once you start paying attention to it, then it sort of becomes a more unconscious center of attention. So when you are presented with a choice or opportunity, bring your attention to the sequence of what happens in your body. What comes first? What came after that? How do you feel after a decision was made? All of these things are important to understand what is in charge here, for you to discern what is impeding my intuition messaging, what is getting in the way, and then what's the opposite of that? What is the intuition messaging? What should I be paying attention to? What did it say? How did it feel? And then the next time, you're going to gain more awareness of when it's happening sooner. And then there's going to be a point where you are in it. You are receiving the messaging. You are discerning what's happening in real time. And then there comes a point when you are anticipating the opportunity. You're anticipating what's going to be presented. And then you're in control and you're building the story. You are human in your true power. You are not trying to change anything. You are not forcing a different feeling. You're just watching the sequence. And because once you start noticing the pattern, something happens almost without effort. The conditioned fear signal starts losing volume. The intuitive signal becomes easier to recognize, and your attention is the tuning mechanism. And then things are happening in flow. And you almost don't even recognize it after a while because it becomes a new conditioning for you. You're sort of reconditioning yourself. Awareness itself is almost the entire effort. And once you start paying attention to the sequence, the fear conditioning starts shrinking because you finally saw it for what it was. And now you know what to pay attention to and where your priority lies when it comes to your precious attention. What to pay attention to. Moments when fear was the first reaction to an opportunity and what emotion or sensation followed. Pay attention to how you felt after making a decision, especially a no. Was there a regret, a sense of misdirection? Because that is information. Also pay attention to smaller moments throughout the day. A phrase someone used that stuck, a direction you felt pulled toward without a clear reason, a decision that felt clear before your reasoning mind got involved. One thing that it's hard to separate psychic from intuition in some circumstances. There are times when the psychic overlaps the intuition, and I think there's more access to the psychic and intuition working together when you start working faster with your intuition, in the sense that you feel the pull of the intuition, you receive its messaging. It's almost like you don't even logically process. And the psychic almost comes along with it as to why or what you're going to benefit from. So the intuition and psychic ability, while they're not the same tool, they can overlap and work together in directing you. The intuition is the magic 8-ball. Remember, there's only so much information it gives. Psychic helps maybe explain why or how, or it inspires you in a particular way through imagery, or had a thought that appeared in my head. A gut signal can arrive alongside a flash of imagery. The directional stop or go from the body plus a brief image or knowing pointing toward why. Early in this work, I've especially noticed with exploring psychic ability, intuition was just automatically a part of the process. I couldn't tell the difference between the two. But now I see how they had worked together. And there are many times when they do work together. And our work is to figure out what tool is doing what. So early in this work for me, the two felt like the same thing. But then eventually there was a separation and a recognition and oh my God, that's amazing. All right, so let's zoom out for a moment. We've covered what the tool is, where it lives in the body. We've covered why it went quiet and the larger structural reason behind that suppression. And we have covered what it looks like to bring it back online. And so the bigger picture is that intuition is the trust pillar of our entire metaphysical abilities, sovereign self living practice. Psychic ability changes your relationship with truth. Higher self-alignment changes your relationship with choice. Intuition changes your relationship with trust, both with the self, the trust of the mechanisms within you that aren't of you. Like you don't choose those, but you learn how to tune them, recognize them, and recondition. And so this trust you learn for yourself, you can recognize outside the self. And so you do this with your own signal, with your own knowing. The suppression of intuition, it wasn't accidental. It was meant to be like that because it's easier for people outside of you to manage you with systemic suppression. For everybody. Everybody gets suppressed. You're not alone. It's not just you. And so how do we change that? It starts with where we pay attention, how we pay attention, and being able to pay attention to what your body is saying through emotions, sensations. Simply, that's intuition. And when the tool gets integrated, what changes is that decisions come faster. You can even recondition yourself to work in flow with what intuition delivers. And that way, you're not even consciously making a choice. It's sort of like, oh, my intuition has spoken. I'm going this way. That's that, moving along. So less fear is entering in your everyday life. There's more trust in your flow, in your sense of self. This gains confidence in the self because you know what helps you make decisions and you're in tune with it and you trust it and it just works on its own. It's like automated. And it also, that speed also allows for psychic stuff to come through too. And so not only does your intuition become a tool you can trust, but it also can generate a stronger psychic relationship for you. There becomes less effort with it, less time in fear conditioning, and you've developed a new kind of conditioning. And it's one that's aligning you with who you are to become more content, become more in charge, to be more in your power, which is the sovereign self. So the time that you overrode the signal, the time that you didn't pay attention, that's because you didn't have a tool to trust. You weren't even maybe aware of how the tool worked, but you knew the word gut feeling. So you had something to work with at least. So now you can expand upon that and we can really start dissecting what your language, how that language works, and start paying attention to where intuition is actually speaking to you. Because once your attention starts getting focused on what is more important, then that's when you start gaining that sovereign self authority. That's when the inner authority can really do its job, and when you can really start learning what trust actually is. I love to think that your intuition was never wrong. I do believe there is no such thing as wrong intuition. What I do believe is that shit gets in the way. You weren't ignoring your intuition. You were attuned to pay attention to something else. And sometimes it was a little bit louder than what your intuition was trying to share with you. You were doing exactly what you were taught to do. Nobody told you to pay attention to anything else. But guess what? The tables have turned. How the turning of the tables have happened. And now we're starting to pay attention to the sequence. We're starting to pay attention to when the intuition is speaking. And with that, we can start reconditioning and start to integrate what trusting the self actually feels like. And with that, we start building a collective of people that are confident in their decision making, in trust. I think if we can take control of this word, of the experience of trust, then we're in a whole new ballgame for humanity. You just got to pay attention to what your body has been saying all along. That's all you got to do. There's going to be moments coming soon where you listened, you did what was given to you, and you're going to say, oh my God, this is working. This is right on. I get it now. And fear is going to be a lot less present in your life that need to be heard, need to be acknowledged. And then you can dismiss it and turn your attention to what your intuition is trying to tell you. Because that is what is getting you closer to who you really are and more in control of your life. You're not trying to become more intuitive. The tool's already running. You're learning to recognize its language. It's language for you. You're learning to separate it from the conditioning that's placed with it. And you're learning to trust your own tool. And it takes time. It takes practice. It takes effort and attention. And that's the hardest part, I think, is turning your attention to it. And the good news is awareness is the most effort. And if you can do that piece within itself, then you're already changing the script. Like you're already gaining your power back because you're working towards your freedom. So here's some questions to leave you with. What are you currently overriding with logic that your body has had an opinion on for a while? What would shift if you gave the first signal you felt before the story built? Just a moment to land. And where have you felt the quiet pull that you explained away? And what would it have looked like to follow it? In the next episode, episode 9, we are looking at higher self as coherence. We're looking at the strategic purpose level tool that takes the directional signal from intuition and builds something with it. We're talking strategy. We're talking a map. We're talking what makes you feel good. And we're talking about purpose in practice. And that does it for this episode of Sovereign Humankind, Evolving Inner Authority Through Metaphysical Skill. Next episode, episode 9, we're going to be looking at how these tools work together when it comes to the higher self and what you actually become when you stop overriding your own systems. That's on the way. But please don't believe everything I tell you. You need to explore it. You need to test it. And you need to see what becomes possible. And if you're feeling right now that your interest has been piqued or your curiosity is feeling ignited, that's the feeling of sovereignty. You feel it. You know it's possible. And that is the beacon that leads to magnificent, innate, and metaphysical human embodiment. It's there. And if you appreciated the information that I shared with you, please consider making a donation at buymeacoffee.com/nextgenmedium. Come visit me at nextgenmedium.com and you can take part in the Next Gen Sovereign community where you can explore on your own and then be part of the community and doing fun things with people that are trying to witness and experience the same things you are. Yeah, come, join us. This is Sarah Nickerson of nextgenmedium.com and the Next Gen Sovereign community. Be well, take care, and get to observing. See you next time.